One way to go about making cool text is to create some 3D text in an application. And from here, you can adjust the font, go down to geometry, and you can adjust the extrusion, which is how deep this text is grown, and then go down to the bevel profile and turning on enable bevel, picking a type of profile, whether it's stepped and sharp or nice and round and smooth. To add a texture to this requires painting up this object. You export the object, then you import your object into a painting application like Substance Painter. And once in here, you prepare this object for painting. And then after you set up your textures, you can either start painting or you can start out by finding a smart material and drag that smart material onto your object. And now you're given this instantly great looking texture. And then you continue painting out to give this more character. And then you can export this and bring it back to your 3D application, set up some lights and render it out for After Effects. You then would take a sequence of images and import it into After Effects and continue working on integrating your title with the rest of your shot. Let's create some 3D text to integrate into your special effects. This just doesn't have to be 3D text. It also could be shapes used to extrude outward into 3D space. Start with a new composition, calling this the 3D comp. Go to the 3D renderer and select Cinema 4D. Usually, you're using the classic 3D. When you go Cinema 4D, you get some special effects such as reflections, extrusions and bevels, materials, environments. You also will lose some blending modes, track mattes, layer styles. With the Cinema 4D renderer selected, click on OK. Type out some text. Going to toggle off the alpha transparent background just to see the text. And right now, we're not using anything special within 3D. So just stylize things the way you need them. You'll be reusing this text layer to create textures onto the 3D text in a bit. This is good enough to start. Duplicate the text layer and just hide it for later use. Right now, just focus in on this text layer. Make it a 3D layer by clicking the cube. Next part is to extrude this. You can press the AA key to bring up all things related to 3D, or you could just unfold the menus, go to geometry options and material options. The AA lets you just focus in on this 3D layer. Scroll down under geometry options and go to the extrusion property and just increase that. Jump to your two views. You can see the extrusion happening. The extrusion just gives this a three-dimensional thickness along the z-axis. And the z-axis is the axis that faces outward and inward into the composition. In order to see this a little better, add a light to the scene. Right-click, New, Light. Select a point light. You could give it a color if you want. Just go offset the color a little bit and click on OK. From the top viewport, move the light around. Could duplicate this light. Control D or Command D and drag it over. Now you can see the shading happening with the shadows. Change the light color. Under light options, Jumping back to one view, and apply bevel to this object by selecting the letters, pressing the AA key, and scroll down to the geometry section. For bevel style, right now, none is selected, and you can pick between angular, concave, or convex. Go use angular and increase its thickness. If you want a smoother look, then use convex. That gives rounded edge. Going back to angular. Instead of lighting this just with lights, we can use an image to project onto it and use that as a way to texturize. The object will pick up the environment look. Import an image. Here's an image. And when you have your image in the scene, just drag it down anywhere in your scene. In order for this object to see this image, let me first stretch my image a little bit bigger. We're not going to be using this image as a direct rendering, just as an environment. In order for this object to see this image and use it as a reflection, right-click on that layer and select Environment Layer. You might not be seeing anything. That's because you have to increase the reflection of this object in order to see the environment. AA key, scrolling on down to the material options. Reflection intensity. You increase that to 100%. There's your environment, and let me go to the environment layer, and under its options, you can rotate it, and that can be animated. Just rotating it a little bit to show that this environment is created by this image. Let me fold up this layer and get back to the reflection intensity. Probably don't want it so intense. Let me pull it back. Now the inside bevels and extrusions have this reflection created by increasing the reflection intensity. You want it to look a little duller, you can increase the roll-off. Or set it back to 0 to have it at full intensity. We could create some light passes going across the text. That will take a little CPU time up to have this light go here, and it's great for this general effect. If you want a strong light pass, we could do that by using a composition layer. Go create a new composition, new composition. Calling it light pass. Create an object, such as an oval. Going to move the pivot point of the oval right to the center of it. Picking up the Move tool again, applying a Fastbox blur to this. Just to soften this up as a light pass. Rotating might be fun. Rotating that. Increase its size. Start it over here. For the position, P key. And then 2 seconds later, this gets all the way to the other side. Going to have this animation loop by applying a loop out. Let's apply this to the object in the scene. Create a new composition, new composition. But before you just hit enter, pull up Final. Under 3D Renderer, taking a look at 3D renders again, using Cinema 4D, you lose track mats, blend modes, and layer styles. I need that type of stuff in order to create this fake light pass. So select Classic 3D for this final composition. That's very important. Within this final composition, drag in your 3D comp. There's your 3D comp as text, and it does nothing. You can do all your animation within this 3D comp, and in the final, this is the final composite of everything, including the light pass. Let's take a look at this light pass. Let me just place it on top. All right, it passes over it, but it's not carving into the letters. In order to do that, to carve into the letters, go back to the 3D comp, and this text layer was hidden. This is what's going to be used as the pre-composition to go here. Cutting it from here and going to the final comp, pasting it here. Selecting the light pass layer, and that's an interesting effect. Some other day, that could be very useful. Right now, just selecting the light pass layer like this, and going to the track mat, use the text layer that you just pasted as a Luma mat. You can play with the opacity. Maybe this light pass shouldn't be so intense. If it's not opacity, you can play with the blend modes, such as soft light. You want a variety of colors going across this text. Go back to this original one. You could duplicate the layer, offset it in time a little bit. There's a second one, and change this color, maybe to something a little more warm. Going back to your final comp. If you want to spread out the look of this light pass, go back to your original light pass comp, and you could always scale it. Maybe things overlap like this. Play with the blend modes here as well, like overlay or soft light. Let me change this one from blue to red. Go back to your final and take a look. Right now, only the top layer is getting this light pass, nothing below it. That's because this is the template for the Luma mask. You want the whole letters to get that light pass. You could duplicate this composition, which is the 3D layer composition. Let me turn off Luma mask for a moment. To this 3D layer composition, you could apply contrast. And applying contrast to this top layer, and a lot of brightness, will get this closer to being a Luma matte. You want also to see it a little better, you can apply a tint to this layer. And wherever it's dark like this, instead of using that swatch, use a lighter gray. Going to the light pass layer, and for its track matte, select Luma Matte. And that applies the light pass to all the text, including the sides. You want to texturize the front. Let's jump back to that 3D composition. Even though I just threw it out, I'm going to pick up this text again, Command Copy, or Control Copy, go into this final, Command V for paste. You can colorize this just as regular text. And maybe that's enough for what you're trying to achieve. And the light pass is now just affecting the beveled and extruded sides. You want to add an actual texture to this. Import an image and drag that image right below the text layer. This image might be too small. You can apply a repeat to it. Type in the word tile and select repeat tile, CC repeat tile, and apply to that image layer. Expand the right, left, down for the bottom and top. Now you have a nice big swatch of image. And to this image layer, use the text layer right above it. Let me set that to white instead of red. Now go to the image layer, and for the track matte, select Luma Matte. Now you texturize the text. You want to take this just slightly further. Maybe instead of rust, you want the metalness to show through, so it's a little shiny underneath it. Let's investigate how to do this. Wherever rust appears, that should be alpha applied to this layer. And select this layer, and right-click on this layer, and pre-compose it. I'm going to leave my attributes on the outside. This way, the text layer, which is being used as a Luma Matte, isn't dragged within this pre-composition. You could call this texture. Double-click within the texture layer. Here's the image. And the goal is, everywhere where there's a dark spot, to be alpha'd. Duplicate this layer and turn it off, and we'll get back to this. Increase the contrast of this layer. We're trying to get a grayscale image out of this. Go to contrast, apply brightness and contrast to that top image, and increase the contrast, maybe the brightness. I'm going to apply a tint, just to make it a little easier to see. And next, apply a curve. And adjust the curve to get these darker regions happening. And after you do that, apply another contrast. And increase that contrast. This might be as good as we could get it for here. This is the original image. On this bottom layer, select from Track Matte, Luma Matte. You turn on and off the transparent background right here. This shows through to the alpha in the darker spots, and that's what we were looking to achieve. Let me turn this back on, jump to the final composition, and now you can see, instead of rust, now you're seeing through to that original metal. Turning this layer off and on. You study a spot like here. Instead of rust, now it's kind of dirt, peeled paint and dirt. And this shows how you can use After Effects to create interesting title moments.